All right, we're going to do tracks now. On the test, you can see tracks a couple of different ways. You can see a drawing. You can see an actual track, if there's actually one on the ground where we're doing the test, or a mold of a track, which is a track that's been made on the ground that plaster of Paris or plastic has been poured into and made a mold. So that's kind of the three ways you'll see tracks. Again, there's resources on the internet to go to. I'm going to be showing you some things. I'm not going to be showing you everything. So go look at those resources. For tracks, you're going to be looking at, is it a hoof? Is it a webbed foot? Is it a foot with toes like your dogs or cats? That's going to lead you in a direction. Then you're going to look at size. So tracks are fairly straightforward. And then we also have bird tracks where you're looking at size and those kind of things. So let's just start. We've got two hooved animals in Mississippi. This is a deer track, or remember, a white-tailed deer track to get full credit. A deer track, this is the front. A deer track has a more pointed tip to it. The only two we have are the deer and a wild pig or a feral hog. Feral hog does not have the point at the front. It has a rounded end on both ends. So, excuse me. Distinguishing characteristic between the two hooved animals is pointed white-tailed deer, rounded at both ends is the wild hog. All right. Go to our biggest track. Our biggest track here, fairly big animal. When you think about that, you compare it to the size of my hand. That's a large animal. Should probably only be thinking about 2 feet that are this big on an animal in Mississippi. That would be the black bear and the beaver. Beaver, because it's aquatic, is going to have a webbed foot. So that automatically takes us to a black bear. But not distinguishing characteristics, but characteristics of a lot of your land mammals are a pad, toe pads, and nails. And the nails are readily seeable here, so we know it's not a cat. But extremely large is going to be a bear. Front feet and back feet are different in a lot of animals. This is the back foot of the bear. It's actually elongated, kind of like our foot. But again, pad, 5 toes, and nails. So front and back, a little bit different. You need to look at both of them when you're going back and looking at tracks on these resources, because you don't know which one will be giving you. All right, large webbed foot. This is large. Let's look at it in comparison. Here's another webbed foot. Biggest one, smallest one. This is actually a beaver. So very large foot. Beaver, actually back foot, front foot going on right here. So extremely different, but you can see the webbing there. So again, pad, toes, nails, really dog size, medium dog size is about the size of a Labrador or something like that. So we should be really, because we've got nails prominently sticking out, it's not a cat. So we should be thinking about the dog family here. So we've discussed before that we have 3 dogs, the coyote, the two foxes, gray fox and red fox. So let's look at all of those. Put these to where they can be seen. So that's our three canines. We've got red fox, we've got gray fox, and we've got coyote. All of them, the nails are pretty prominent. You might not see it so well right there on the gray fox, but they're there if you can look at it in profile like I'm seeing it. Gray fox is the smallest. It's the smallest one. Not a lot of difference in these, but a red fox has a surprisingly big foot for its size. It actually lives close to water, lakes, streams, those kind of things. It prefers more water edge than a gray fox. And because of that, it's got a little bit bigger foot because it spends a lot of time in wet habitat. This is the biggest one is the coyote. So there's all three of your canine feet. So looking surprisingly like the canines, but the claws not so prominent. Claws are basically retracted here. When we did the skins, we talked about there's one cat native to Mississippi now. That's the bobcat. So there we have a bobcat track. Claws retracted again. All right, let's stay with the mammals. Hold these where you can see them. Two medium-sized tracks. Again, we've got pads, we've got toes. Both kind of the same size, but some characteristics here. This hand, to me, I always think it looks a lot more human-like. It's kind of got fingers that look like our fingers, whereas this one looks a lot more animal-like. This one also has interesting characteristics where the toes kind of have skin flaps on them. And a skin flap on the toe helps an animal climb. Actually spends a decent amount of time in trees. You see that on squirrels and some animals like that. So we know that this animal spends a lot of time in trees. This weird looking little foot right here that looks like a human baby or something is the weird animal that we have, which is the Virginia opossum. In this size, we should be thinking possum and raccoon. They're not webbed, so we know they're terrestrial. We might be thinking about a skunk here, but in this size, we've got a raccoon and a Virginia opossum, and the Virginia opossum is just a weird little animal with a weird little foot. Raccoon, extremely long toes. It's really manipulative animal. Animal likes to or raccoon likes to wash its feet or wash its food. It can do a lot of things, manipulate a lot of things, and that's because its toes are so long. All right, we got a webbed foot here. Our webbed feet are not always as webbed as the beaver was, but this one, you notice that there is webbing between the toes. So when we get to a webbed-footed animal this size, this is a fairly big, akin to the size of the raccoon and the possum we just looked at. So we should probably only have one guess with an animal that size, with a foot that big, and that's going to be the river otter. So that's a river otter track, or mold of a track. Again, we've got webbing there. Might not be humongously evident, but it is there. That's actually the back foot. Look at the front foot. That's actually a large mink foot. And that can probably be down to about half that size. But that's the aquatic animals that I have. I don't think I have anything else. I'm looking. No. So here's a terrestrial animal. It's not webbed. Small foot, much smaller than the raccoons and stuff we've been looking at. It's got the prominent skin flap that I was pointing out on the raccoon. So that's telling us that it spends a lot of time in a tree. When we're starting to think about animals that are that size with a foot that spend a lot of time in a tree, we should probably be thinking about squirrels. And that is a squirrel. I know with the tracks you don't have to differentiate. It's just a squirrel. Here's a rabbit foot, rabbit track. Really not a lot of evidence in the pads or nails or anything there. There's a lot of fur on the feet. And so what you're seeing in this track is fur. Rabbits have extremely furry feet. If you've ever seen a rabbit's foot, you know, people carry them sometimes for luck. It's just a big round thing of fur. And so that's what their feet look like. Same size as a squirrel, basically. So pretty easy to tell that when it's got a lot of fur on it, it's a rabbit's foot. Again, rabbit is one of those species where you just have to know rabbit. You don't have to say cottontail, swamp rabbit, whatever, differentiate in between them. This one is interesting. You got toes. You can see the nails on the toes, but you're also looking at scales on the foot, like kind of like snake scales or snake skin. So we start thinking about reptiles here. The only reptile we should be thinking about that's a land animal in Mississippi is an alligator. An alligator is an aquatic species, right? It spends time in the water, so it's going to have a webbed foot. This does not have a webbed foot, but it's still got scales or, you know, a weird leathery skin with bumps all over it that's not aquatic. This is actually an armadillo foot. And armadillo is not a native species, but one that's become adapted, kind of like the wild hog. So one that you could see on the test. If we've got a complete track of an armadillo's always got a tail drag in between the feet. It's dragging its long tail. Tail's really heavy. It doesn't pick it up. So other distinguishing characteristics of an armadillo track. But interesting track there. I think that's all the mammals I have. Let's move to birds. If you look at your list of what species you're supposed to know, we've got 2 large species on there. We should only be guessing those 2 species when we see these tracks. Thing about birds is I always have 4 toes. One is usually in the back. This is either for balance with one that's walking on the ground, or for grasping a limb and wrapping around the limb for ones that are perching in a tree. Usually the longer it is, the more that it means that it's a land animal and it's using that back toe for balance. Two species that we should be guessing if we've looked at our list and we know that our two largest birds on that list are a great blue heron and a wild turkey. Of the two birds, if we think about them, great blue heron stands taller than a turkey, but it doesn't weigh as much as a turkey. So the bigger bird has the bigger foot. Great blue heron lives around the water, feeds in water. That big long toe lets it spread its weight out and not sink into the mud. Whereas a turkey doesn't have, it will spend some time in the mud, but doesn't spend as much time in a swampy area as a great blue heron. So a smaller feet, nails a lot more prominent on the wild turkey, and you can see the nails back toe not as long because it's not trying to distribute weight in the mud. So difference between the two, size and some characteristics like toe length. I think there's only two other birds that you have to know tracks on. This is webbed. Told you it's a bird. So we know that it's aquatic species if it's webbed. Still, again, 4 toes, 1 backwards. Webbed species in Mississippi that are birds that are on your list are ducks and geese. You don't have to know species, you just have to know duck or goose, and a goose is bigger than a duck. So the big one is a goose, and that's the answer. Small one is a duck, and that's the answer. Now, let me show you a little bit here. This is actually a duck too, much smaller than this one. So ducks come in a lot of different sizes. So, but you know, we've got 3 geese in Mississippi. All of them have a fairly big foot. This is our biggest duck. This is one of our smallest ducks. So that's kind of the variation in duck size that you might see in tracks right there. All right, that's tracks. Went through those quickly, kind of showed you some distinguishing things like whether you can see the nails, not see the nails, size, webbed versus unwebbed, scales or leathery skin like the armadillo. I don't have alligator track. You would definitely see scales on it, also webbed. So those are the things to think about. And there's resources to go look at those tracks on your own as well, and additional tracks that I don't have. So use those resources.